They cut my salary on a Thursday. 2 days later, a lawyer called asking if I knew anything about a wall failing on a job we'd done. I laughed at first, a nervous, hollow laugh. Of course I knew. The drawings. The reports. The engineer who walked off the job because his plans had been ignored. All of it sat on my hard drive. All of it sat in a folder on my desk. He thought it was a coincidence. He thought the worst I could do was gripe at HR and look for another job. He was wrong. When you spend your life building things that are supposed to hold weight, you learn what failure looks like. A little sink. A hairline crack. A machine you've seen in red ink in a shop drawing. It's not abstract. It hums in your bones. So when he took my pay, he didn't just insult me, he made me a witness. And witnesses can speak. That's exactly what I did. If you've ever been screwed over by someone who thinks the rules don't apply to them, you're going to like this one. Hit like, subscribe, and stay until the end. You'll see how a company that gambled with safety and pennies got paid back in full. If you've ever had a boss cut your pay, or watched someone cheat to protect a profit margin, this is the video for you. Stick around, I'll walk you through the planning, the small decisions that made the big payoff possible, and the exact moment everything came crashing down. And if you want the long-form version broken into scenes for voiceover, say so in the comments. My name is Alex. I'm a project coordinator at a mid-size construction firm. We did civil work for municipal clients, roads, retaining walls, drainage. Nothing glamorous, but practical. Things that matter when a storm hits. The owner, let's call him Richard, is the kind of man who measures success by the size of his margin. He is always looking for a cheaper material, a faster setup, this smart substitution that saves a line item in a spreadsheet. He's charming with clients. Ruthless with staff. He calls it being competitive. I called it watching a company contaminate its own conscience. The week they lowered my salary was the last straw. They framed it as a necessary temporary adjustment due to tight cash flow. It was presented with coffee and melancholy, like a favor. But I'd been watching the job files for months. I knew what corners he cut to save those pennies. A few days after the pay cut, a voice from a law firm asked if I had seen anything odd on the Colford retaining wall project. I froze. The Colford job had been a disaster in slow motion. I could feel the blood in my ears. The building tension, what I knew. The Colford job started out like every other, engineer drawing stamped and signed, an engineer who visited the site, a plan on paper that promised a wall that would hold back both earth and future storms. The engineer's drawings called for proper excavation, keying the footing below frost, and a drainage system. The reports emphasized it: dig to depth, use specified backfill, compact in lifts. It was all spelled out, black and white. What wasn't followed was the company's devotion to the design. I remember the meeting where Richard said, smiling, "Can we shave 4 inches off the base? Save on material and time." People laughed nervously. The foreman shrugged. The subcontractor said it could be done. The project moved forward without the depth the engineer had specified. Then there were the sign-offs. Fields marked compaction, checked here and there. Paper certifications produced after the fact. An engineer who visited once saw the corner cutting and walked off the job, refusing to stamp anything further. He left a terse email saying the project did not follow his design and that he could not be associated with potential failure. I kept copies of the drawings. I watched the emails. I filed the reports. I felt the gravity of it, literally. Walls are supposed to keep tons of soil at bay. If the foundation is wrong, the wall fails and someone gets hurt. It's not a line item. It's a hazard. How it felt. When they lowered my salary, the insult cut into that feeling of responsibility. It was the universe telling me that they valued profit more than people. That they could clip my livelihood and expect me not to notice the larger pattern. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, the letter in my hand, feeling both small and molten, like a pot on the verge of boiling over. My shoulders tightened. My jaw clenched until my teeth ached. I was tired, yes, but more than tired, disgusted. The lawyer's call was the match. The turn, decision time. I didn't plan anything cinematic the night I decided. No superhero montage. It was me and a laptop and a very simple idea. If the company had saved pennies by ignoring standards, then someone had to tell the people who actually hold these things accountable: the lawyers, the inspectors, the clients. If I stayed silent, those walls would eventually fail and someone would get hurt. If I spoke, I risked my job and reputation. But a moral problem had a simple calculus: people's safety outweighed my comfort. So I made a list. Copies of the engineered drawings. The engineer's email resignation. The field reports showing inadequate excavation and missing compaction records. Photographs of the as-built conditions. The purchase orders showing alternate materials. A timeline of who made what decision and when. I didn't want a vendetta. I wanted the truth to exist outside the company's cozy narrative. I did what you do if you want it to be effective and not reckless. Collect everything. Digital copies of the stamped drawings. Emails, notes, and the engineer's resignation email. Photos from the site showing fill placement and depths. Any internal memos that recommended the savings. Anonymize where needed. I made sure the files were factual and not slanderous. The goal was not personal humiliation. It was exposure of unsafe construction practice. Contact channels that matter. I found the law firm asking questions, the very one that would likely represent the client or a third party. I sent the files to their secure email and posted a copy to a civil engineering oversight body and the municipal client that had funded the project. I also made sure to include the engineer who had walked off the job, giving him the space to corroborate. Mail hard copies. Paper has a way of getting through messy filters. I printed everything, signed nothing, and mailed identical packets to the law firm, the city inspector, and the owner of the municipal property where the wall stood. I used traceable mail for some packets and anonymous envelopes for others. I didn't gloat. I did it like closing a file. I started looking for a new job. I wasn't reckless. If the hammer came down, I wanted to be ready. The plan wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was responsible whistleblowing with contingencies. The morning I mailed the packets, I walked through the city as if nothing was different. But inside I felt like a person who had lit a fuse and walked away. The envelopes slid into the mailbox with a soft thud, and a small irrational relief unfurled through my chest. That afternoon my phone buzzed. "We've received information relevant to the Colford retaining wall. Please confirm availability to discuss." The law firm called again. They were sharper this time. The municipal inspector's office opened a work order to inspect the wall immediately. The engineer we'd lost on the job reached out to say he'd been contacted and asked if we indeed had the files. He said he'd back up the timeline. I slept like a person who'd done the right thing. Not peaceful, too much adrenaline for that, but at least honest. The escalation, when the cost becomes real. What happened next was slow, legal, and devastating to him. First, the inspection report came back: inadequate depth, incorrect backfill material, missing keying under the footing. The language was clinical and brutal. Non-compliant, it read in bold. The municipality issued a stop work and began the process of demanding remediation and possible civil liability for failing to follow engineered specifications. Then the lawyers started issuing discovery demands. Lawsuits appear less like fireworks and more like arithmetic. Lawyers' letters, depositions, insurance companies asking questions. The owner, who'd been so proud of his margins, started to lose the meetings he used to win. His phone calls became defensive. His lunches became terse. He sent angry emails to the foreman that felt small and petulant. He was, in short, a man finally active under the thing he'd built. To his credit, he tried to spin it. "There was a misunderstanding," he said to anyone who would listen. "Field conditions required adjustment." But the truth lived in the plan he'd ignored and the engineer who refused to sign the as-built. There were legal fees. Not a small number. a drip that turned into a stream. The client pressed for remediation costs and potential third-party damages. Insurance appointed defense counsel who then asked for evidence and started to see patterns. The financial cost of cutting corners ballooned into hundreds of thousands of dollars, and his margin shrank into a negative number. Climactic payoff, 5 to 7 minutes, delivery with rising cadence, short sentences, then slow reflection. The climactic moment isn't cinematic in the Hollywood sense. It's in a deposition room where the owner sits quietly as an engineer lays out, under oath, the emails and the missing compaction reports. It's in the municipal council where the inspector reads the violations into public record. It's when the owner's favorite client pulls funding until remediation is guaranteed. He called me once, a month into it. His voice was small. "Who sent those packets?" The question was not a demand. It was a plea. He wanted a known enemy to confront, to punish. I replied calmly. "I didn't send anything. I didn't lie. I also didn't volunteer." He tried to save a few dollars. He'd gambled on the idea that shortcuts won't be noticed until too late. He'd gambled on the smallness of the people he hurt. But when corners become liabilities, the math catches up. In the end, the company was fined, required to rebuild sections at his expense, and had to carry out long and costly inspections. Legal bills stacked up. The client's trust evaporated. Contracts were reviewed and some cancelled. The owner saw the business he'd propped up with greed bleed on paper. The man who once smirked at auditors now sat in meetings with his head down. I felt no celebration in those calls to him. There was, instead, a quiet satisfaction. My hands, which had once compiled shady files and shop drawings, hadn't lashed out in anger. They'd done what they were supposed to, hold the plan to account. Let's be honest, this wasn't petty. It wasn't theatrics. It was accountability. Working in construction teaches you a practical ethic. Buildings are promises. Safety is a contract with life. When someone treats that lightly to save $1, they're gambling with people's safety and livelihoods. I wasn't trying to destroy his life for the pleasure of it. I wanted to stop further harm and make it so that reckless shortcuts had consequences. And yes, there was an emotional arc for me. I was betrayed. Undervalued. Angry. But the action I took was not out of spite. It was out of responsibility. There's another truth. Doing the right thing often costs you something. You might lose a job. You might be ostracized. You might have to move on. But the alternative, silence, can cost someone their life. It's not a simple trade. Wrap up, the lesson and the takeaway. If you work in a field where people rely on your competence, construction, healthcare, engineering, remember this. Keep careful records. Speak up when something's wrong. Protect yourself by backing up evidence. If you must act, act legally and responsibly, document, report to authorities, and use the proper channels. For anyone who's been on the receiving end of a paycheck cut while watching someone else profit from negligence, you are not powerless. There are ways to respond that are methodical, legal, and effective. And for the rest of you, maybe this is a reminder, shortcuts have a cost. Sometimes the cost is paid immediately. Sometimes it's paid later. But the ledger always balances. If this story gave you chills, hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life revenge stories that are both moral and satisfying. Tell me in the comments, have you ever found yourself in a position where doing the right thing cost you? What did you do?